So if that is you, Class 1, come on down.
Well, we're going to kick off our breeding gilt show today with the Berkshire division, and certainly appreciate the exhibitors bringing out some that are pretty young yet to be looking at, but they're certainly got some quality to them. And I'm going to go ahead and use the young man's gilt that's closest to me as your class winner. I think she's the one that just strikes you as driving at you with the most general width and substance to her, one that's good in her rib cage, and I think still has the build and design to look like she'll maintain herself in terms of balance as she continues to grow. The young lady's gilt that's going to end up in second's got a little more extension to her and length of spine. You appreciate that. Like to see her hooked up a little bit better in her top line and maybe have some of the center body and power of the gilt that wins the class. A nice pair of Berkshires here to start off the day. Let's congratulate those exhibitors in first and second.
Results for Class 1 Junior Spring Gilt. First place goes to Liam Hartner. Second place goes to Liam Hartner. In your program, 2-1. Now entering the ring is Class 3 Senior Spring Gilts.
Nice pair of spring Berkshire gilts that came in here next, and we're definitely looking at some that are more in the right weight range to truly be evaluating them as breeding females. But I think this is a really high quality pair with some nice differences between them. But I think they both share the same quality attributes in terms of being ones that should be able to go into the crate and be productive, and yet still out here in the ring have some attractiveness and profile that you like. I think it's a close decision between the two, but I'm actually going to go ahead and use the gilt that came in second in the ring to win the class. I think she's one that's just a little bit more genuine in her width and dimension as you get in behind her. She's one that maybe wants to pop her spine up just a little bit. I'd like to relax her there a touch, but I think she strikes you as just a little more pulled apart in her skeleton. The young man's gilt's a little bit softer in her body and flank. I think she's a little bit better in her underlying quality. She's one, though, that just gets a little bit flatter in her blade and more disappointing up high, one that maybe doesn't flex good enough in her hock and rear pastern. But once again, a nice, really good pair of spring Berkshire gilts. Let's give those exhibitors a round of applause.
Results for Class 3 Senior Spring Gilt. First place, Chelsea Riley. Second place, Brody Harrison. In your program, scratch 2-1. Now in the ring will be the selection of our champion Berkshire.
Well, I won't belabor my time here too long since we just saw these two pairs of gilts. I'm going to go ahead and use the bigger gilt to win the division, and I'm going to go ahead and follow her with the second place in that class. Just gilts that are clearly more advanced in their development and ones you can evaluate a little more appropriately at this point for how they're going to be long term. And I think they're a really high quality pair of gilts as they were close in their respective class. So we'll use the big spring gilt for champion and the second place gilt out of the spring class for reserve. Let's give those Berkshire exhibitors a big round of applause.
Congratulations to Chelsea Riley with her champion Berkshire. Now moving along to the Duroc division with Class 2 Senior Spring Gilt.
Well, I appreciate this young man starting off our Duroc division, which I think is one of our bigger classes or breeds of the day. And I think a nice Duroc gilt that's really good in her skeleton and build, one that's extremely flexible. I believe she came out during showmanship as well, and you appreciate the levelness of design she's got for her breed, and yet still has some of the muscularity that you'd expect. You know, is she the most powerful one you've come across? No, but I think she's still adequate in that regard, and one that should certainly go into a production setting with some breed quality. Let's give this young man a big round of applause. We'll look forward to seeing her later in the champion selection.
Results for Class 2 in the Duroc division, Senior Spring Gilt. First place goes to Hartley Prime. Now in the ring will be Class 3 Duroc Senior Spring Gilt.
Well, we got a nice big class of really high quality Duroc gilts from top to bottom, and I know we've got some litter mates in here, and it shows because we've got some quality and some good differences as well, though. And I think this top pair is really exercising contrasts, and depending on where your priorities might lie, I think you could go either way and defend yourself really well. For me, I go back to what's harder to do when I'm talking about being a breeder and having my own operation. I think keeping structural foundation really good is critical, especially in this breed where it's maybe a little easier to pack some power into them. And I think that's what's really unique about the young man's gilt that's over here to the left of me. She's going to be your class winner in this division. I think she's just so pliable in her skeleton and good in her feet down at the ground. She's not the most massive and burly in her spine as the gilt that comes in second. She could be a little bit more powerful off either end. To me, she's more than adequate, and I just love her build and extension and flexibility. I think that's tougher to make in one, and that's why she's going to win this class. Certainly don't want to take anything away from the young man's gilt because she has all of those other superlatives. She's stouter boned. She's bolder in her rib cage. She's more powerful from behind. And if you want to latch onto that as your class winning attributes, I think you got to like that. To me, she's a little bit more jammed up in her skeleton. I don't know that she goes to the ground as big in her foot as she is in her bone work, and she just doesn't get out and reach quite as good off of either end of her skeleton if I'm going to be critical of a good one. So that's a really nice top pair there of Duroc gilts that both of those exhibitors should be proud of what they've developed. The young man's gilt that comes out in third, I think she just slides into a logical third place spot. She's just a pretty complete gilt, one that's still got some brood sow look and character to her. She's not quite as stout in her feature. I think she's a little more tentative in her step out of her front end, but that's being nitpicky on a good gilt that just ran into a couple better ones ahead of her. A nice gilt there in your third slot. And coming out in fourth, the young man's got a gilt that I think maybe falls behind a little bit in terms of skeletal width compared to the gilts that preceded it. This kind of bronze-colored gilt, still one that I think is pretty practical in her makeup and prominent in her underline, just a little bit more narrow-constructed and a little more traditional in her look and the way that she runs downhill from the side. Doesn't have some of that extra attractiveness of your class winner. Coming in next, young man's got a gilt that's a little bit bigger skeleton and a little longer bodied. Maybe has a little more natural dimension when you study her right down her top and out of her hip. To me, she's just not hooked up as correctly in her skeletal build and design. She gets a little tight off either end, a little flatter in her rib and drier in her flank. Maybe doesn't have as much brood style look and character. And the gilt that's going to round out the class, still one that I think has some merit to her. She's probably the leanest in the class. I don't know that that serves to her advantage, though, in this particular lineup, as she's one that just strikes you as a little harder doing, one that's not nearly as feminine in her build and look, a gilt that just needs more performance and body mass to match up with her classmates. Please congratulate these exhibitors in a really good class of Duroc gilts, especially there the top two are high quality.
Now in the ring will be Class 4, Senior Sow. Results for Class 3. First place, Quinn Hartner. Second place, Quinn Hartner. Third place, guess who? Quinn Hartner. Fourth place, Owen Wise. Fifth place, Quinn Hartner. Sixth place, Quinn Hartner. In your program, 2, 5, 3, scratch, 1, 6, 4. Now in the ring is Class 4, Senior Sow. Following this, we will have the selection of our champion Duroc.
Well, coming down off of a deeper class, it's nice to see an individual that comes in here and still represents herself well as an individual. Is in the single entry class. Certainly a gilt that I think for being in production still has some look to her and meets up with my expectations in terms of the capacity and mass that she should have to represent her breed. One that still gets around relatively comfortably in terms of her skeleton. Is she as perfect in her build as maybe our class winner that we had in the last group? No, but I think that's still a high quality individual that represents this class well. Please put your hands together for this single entry.
First place Senior Sow goes to Quinn Hartner. Following the selection of our champion Duroc, we will move on to the spot division.
Well, you know, I just saw these guys a few minutes ago, so I won't belabor this too much because I've seen them sufficiently. But I think it makes sense to go back and draw out of our deepest class where I think the quality was deep all the way 2, 3, 4 animals down. Certainly don't want to take anything out of the gilt in our first class, who I think has some redeeming quality yourselves, or the big sow that's in production. But the gilt that comes out of your middle class is going to be your champion here in the Duroc division. Really high quality individual, and one that I think will represent herself well in the overall division. Please congratulate all these Duroc exhibitors for the quality we've had out here today.
Champion Duroc is exhibited by Quinn Hartner. For our spot division, we're going to start with Class 3, Senior Spring Gilt.
Nice pair of 13-liter gilts we've got to sort from here to start off our spot show today. And I'm going to go ahead and use the gilt the young man's driving in front of me to win the class. I think when it comes down to it, in this pair of presumably litter mates, she just got a little more of the quality end of the genetics. Just if we talk about the way she's built from her blade out through her hip, one that's a little more correct in terms of her underline and her head carriage. A gilt that's still really high quality about her underline and body mass. You know, is she the most stable and secure at the surface? That'd probably be where I'd change her just a little bit in the way she gets out and travels, but I can certainly consider her adequate there, and one that really has the shape and squareness you'd expect for a spot, with still some extra look and quality from the side. The gilt that comes in second in this class probably is just a little stouter featured and bigger footed at her foundation, a little bit longer bodied. I like that about her. She's one that just isn't quite as good in the way she's hooked up in her top line and the way she sets and travels out of her rear two, but a nice gilt there to fall into the second hole. Let's give those spot exhibitors a round of applause.
Results for Class 3, Senior Spring Gilt. First place, Liam Hartner. Second place, Liam Hartner. In your program, 2-1. Now in the ring, Class 5, Mature Sow.
Well, I appreciate this young man bringing us several mature females to come back out and see what they look like once they've been in production, and I think you've done a great job of keeping them together in terms of not only their build, but also just their condition and freshness. I think this is a gilt that's really fluid and agile in her movement. She's probably one that's raised off a litter or two and still held together pretty good in terms of her dimension and body, but I think one that still embodies just a really feminine type of female that gets around the ring extremely well, high quality in her underline as well. Let's give this young man a round of applause for his single entry mature sow.
Results for Class 5 mature sow. First place goes to Liam Hartner. We will now have the selection of our champion spot.
I'm going to come back to the younger gilt for your champion spot in this division. Just the extra squareness and dimension that she offers relative to the mature sow, I think is something that is hard to do and yet keep her as built good as she is. The young man's younger gilt will be your champion in this division. Once again, let's congratulate this exhibitor for his good spotted females that he brought out here today.
Congratulations to Liam Hartner, exhibiting his champion spot. We now need all of our breed division champions for the selection of our Supreme Champion breeding gilt.
As we bring our respected breed champions back in here, I think although it's a smaller show here in the breeding division, I think the quality's good, and each of these three should be able to go back into their respective herds and offer some breeding value and some pieces that you can certainly build on and make better. But I think there's a lot of quality. I think the deepest division that you might have heard me by Mike be the most excited about the quality and depth we had came out of your Duroc division. Certainly want to appreciate the gilt driving in front of me as one that I think you can really stand behind with some pride in terms of her quality and pieces. She's pretty elite in my opinion for her breed. We're going to use her as your champion breeding gilt. Let's congratulate the young man with the champion breeding gilt overall.
Congratulations to Quinn Hartner, Supreme Champion Breeding Gilt. All right. This concludes our 4-H Breeding Swine Show. We will reconvene at 4 o'clock for our 4-H Market Swine Show. If swine exhibitors could please make sure they have checked the pink program and make sure that you are in the correct class with the correct pig and all that good stuff.